Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku became the only hero left. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The wind didn't sound the way it used to. That was the first thing Izuku Midoriya noticed when the world ended. Before, the wind would whistle, or howl, or rustle through the leaves of the trees that lined the streets of Muzurifu. Now it shrieked. It tore through the hollowed-out concrete carcasses of skyscrapers and whistled through the rebar ribcages of fallen bridges. It sounded like the earth itself was screaming through a crushed throat. Izuku adjusted the respirator covering the lower half of his face, the hiss of the filter the only rhythm in the silence. He was perched on a gargoyle, or what was left of one, jutting out from the 7th floor of a crumbling structure. 3 years ago, this had been UA High School. 3 years ago, this had been the Fortress of Dreams. Now it was a tomb. The iconic H-shaped glass structure was shattered, the central walkway collapsed into a jagged ravine of debris. Nature was already reclaiming it. Aggressive, mutated ivy, fed by the chemical runoff of the collapse, strangled the masonry in thick, green veins. Izuku shifted his weight. His knees popped, a sound that seemed too loud in the dead air. He wasn't the boy who had walked through these gates with stars in his eyes and trembling legs. He was 19 years old, but his body felt ancient. He wore the grave of the Heroes Society. His suit was a patchwork quilt of survival. The base was his Delta suit, now faded to a dull, dirty olive, covered in patches of Kevlar and leather scavenged from dead friends and foes alike. Across his shoulders, tattered and stained with soot, hung a yellow cape. It was too short for him, frayed at the edges. It had belonged to Gran Torino. Wrapped around his left forearm was a strip of explosive gauntlet, Bakugo's. "It's quiet today," Izuku rasped. His voice was rough, and used to speaking to living things. He wasn't speaking to the air. He was speaking to the ghosts inside his blood. A warm sensation flooded his chest. It felt like a hand resting on his shoulder. "Nana Shimura." "Caution," she seemed to whisper, though no words were spoken. "The quiet is a lie." "I know," Izuku muttered, tapping the side of his iron-soled boot against the concrete. "But the danger sense is low." Just a hum. Like a headache. A sharp, stinging prickle at the base of his neck. The second user. "Move. Don't linger. Static targets are dead targets." "I'm moving," Izuku sighed. He stood up, the metal of his soles grinding against the stone. He didn't jump, he fell. He let gravity take him, tilting forward off the ledge of the main building. The wind rushed up to meet him, whipping his long, matted green hair around his face. Just before he hit the ground, black tendrils erupted from his back. Black whip snapped out, grappling onto a protruding steel beam 3 stories up. With a flex of muscles that were too dense, too hard for a teenager, he swung. He moved through the ruins of his high school like a phantom. He didn't use full cowling constantly anymore. The lightning was too bright, a beacon in the perpetual gray twilight that covered Japan. He moved with the accumulated experience of 8 generations of heroes, silent and terrifyingly efficient. He landed in what used to be the courtyard. The paved path where he had walked with Uraraka and Ida was gone, replaced by craters and dust. He walked toward a mound of rubble that had once been the cafeteria. He was hungry. He was always hungry. One for all burned calories like a furnace, and food was the rarest resource in the wasteland. A low, vibrating thrum in his gut. Daigoro Banjo. "Check the cellar. The vents. You think the rats left anything?" Izuku asked the air. Optimism, came the feeling from the first user Yoichi. A gentle, fragile hope. Izuku crouched by a rusted grate. He ripped it free with a casual tug that bent the steel like wet cardboard. He slipped inside the darkness of the UA substructure. The smell was the worst part. It smelled of old rot, stagnant water, and the metallic tang of dried blood that never quite went away. Izuku clicked on a small flashlight attached to his shoulder, an invention of Mei Hatsum, scavenged from her workshop months after the fall. The beam cut through the dust motes. "Lunch Rush's pantry," Izuku whispered. The shelves were bare. Looters had picked this place clean 2 years ago. But Izuku wasn't looking for shelves. He moved to the back, where a heavy industrial freezer lay tipped over. He had checked this room a year ago and found nothing, but desperation made him thorough. He gripped the heavy door of the freezer. 1, 2, he pulled. The metal groaned and shrieked, the hinges snapping. Inside, tucked into the corner behind a wall of frostbitten insulation, was a box. It was crushed, but the contents were sealed. Protein bars, Izuku breathed. It wasn't gold, but it was worth more than gold. Must have fallen behind the racks before the power died. He sat down right there in the dirt, tearing open a wrapper with his teeth. The bar was rock hard, tasteless, and dry as chalk. To Izuku, it was a feast. He ate two, forcing himself to stop. He shoved the remaining 4 into his utility pouch. Save them, the fourth user urged. For the road. Yeah, Izuku said, chewing slowly to make it last. For the road. He leaned his head back against the cold metal of the freezer. His eyes closed. This was the most dangerous time, the stillness. When he stopped moving, the memories caught up. In the dark behind his eyelids, he saw the fire. He saw Dabi's blue flames consuming the chaotic cityscape. He saw Shigaraki, standing atop the floating coffin of the primal Nomu, laughing as the pro-heroes fell like wheat before a scythe. He saw the moment Ochako had looked at him, debris raining down, and pushed the civilians into the shelter before the door slammed shut, sealing her on the outside. He saw the crater where Kaken had made his last stand. Izuku's eyes snapped open. The green irises were dull, lacking the shine they once held. He rubbed his face, his gloved hand scraping against the stubble on his chin. I need water, he stated, pushing the memories back into the locked box in his mind. He climbed back out of the cafeteria ruins, emerging into the courtyard. The sun was trying to break through the cloud cover, a thick, unnatural blanket of smog and ash that Shigaraki's reform had brought about. It cast the world in a sickly, bruised purple hue. He began to walk toward the pea grounds. There used to be water fountains there. Even if the pipes were dry, the underground cisterns might have collected rain. As he walked past the crumbled remains of the statue of the principal, Nizu, who had been one of the first to be hunted down, Izuku felt it. Bzzzt. The sensation stabbed through his skull like an ice pick. Danger sense. Izuku froze mid-step. He didn't flinch. He didn't gasp. He simply ceased all motion, becoming a statue among the ruins. Where? The sensation rippled from the east. The chaotic, jagged feeling of malice. It wasn't the mindless hunger of a Nomu. It was sharper. Human. Multiple signatures, the fourth warned. Intent to harm. Izuku crouched, his silhouette merging with the shadows of a fallen wall. He activated his comms, a habit that died hard, before realizing there was no one on the other end. Location, he whispered. Ground Beta. Ground Beta. The training city. It was where he had first fought Bakugo. It was where they had learned to be heroes. Now someone was there, and they were hunting. Izuku tapped into one for all. He didn't flood his body with 100%. He couldn't afford the backlash, and he didn't need the power. He channeled a steady 15% into his legs. Green lightning sparked faintly around his boots, buzzing like angry hornets. He launched himself forward. He didn't run, he flowed. He used float to glide over debris, his boots barely touching the ground. He was a green blur, faster than the wind, silent as the grave. Ground Beta was a labyrinth of shattered buildings. The fake city had been bombed out during the initial siege of UA, leaving streets filled with glass and twisted cars. Izuku landed on a rooftop overlooking the central intersection. He went prone immediately, crawling to the edge to peer down. Below, in the center of the street, a fire was burning in a rusted oil drum. There were 3 trucks, heavy-duty, armored with scrap metal, painted with the symbol of the Paranormal Liberation Front. Scavengers, vultures who picked at the corpse of society, loyal to Shigaraki only because he let them do whatever they wanted. There were 6 of them. They were loud, laughing, passing bottles of cheap alcohol around. They wore mismatched riot gear stolen from police stations, but they weren't alone. In the center of the circle, kneeling in the broken glass, was a family. A man, a woman, and a young girl, maybe 7 years old. They were thin, their clothes rags. The father had a bruise blossoming on his cheek. Please, the father begged, his voice cracking. We have nothing else. You took the supplies. Just let us go. One of the scavengers, a towering man with a mutation quirk that gave him skin like concrete and tusks, laughed. He kicked the father in the ribs. The man collapsed, wheezing. You have nothing? The scavenger sneered. You have your lives. That's currency, rat. The Empire pays for labor. The mines in Hokkaido are always looking for bodies. No, the mother wept, pulling the child closer. Please, she's just a child. Children have small hands, another scavenger said, twirling a knife. This one was lanky, with eyes that glowed a faint red. Good for polishing shells. Izuku watched from the roof. Anger. A burning, white-hot fury flooded his mind. That was the second user. Kill them. Restraint, countered the sixth user, N.S.S. Izuku's hands clenched into fists, the leather of his gloves creaking. He hated this. He hated that 3 years after the fall, this was still the reality. The strong crushing the weak. He could drop down there. He could obliterate them in a second, but if he did, if he used his power openly, he might see. Shigaraki, or All for One, the line was blurred now, had eyes everywhere. Search and destroy nomas patrolled the skies. If Izuku was spotted, a legion would descend. He couldn't risk a direct confrontation. Not yet. His body was holding together by duct tape and willpower. The girl is crying, Nana whispered. The feeling was a profound sadness. Izuku looked at the girl. She was shaking, burying her face in her mother's chest. She was wearing a dirty All Might hoodie, 3 sizes too big. The sight broke something inside him. Or perhaps, it repaired something. I can't leave them, Izuku whispered. The mission, the second argued. You are the vessel. If you die, one for all dies. The hope of the world dies. If I leave them, Izuku said, his voice hardening, the green lightning around him intensifying, then the hope of the world is already dead. He stood up. He reached into his utility belt and pulled out a canister. A smoke bomb. Low tech. Reliable. He took a deep breath. The world slowed down. He could feel the gears of gearshift waiting to be engaged, but he didn't need them. He needed Fa gene. He began to build up kinetic energy, flexing his knees, coiling his muscles. Let's go, he whispered. Down on the street, the concrete-skinned villain grabbed the mother by her hair. Get in the truck. Don't make me break your legs to keep you seated, the little girl screamed. Leave her alone. The villain raised a heavy hand to strike the child. Clink hiss. A metal canister bounced off the villain's head and landed in the fire barrel. For a second, everyone froze. Then, the street exploded in thick purple smoke. What the? Ambush! The scavengers scrambled, coughing, their vision obscured. The smoke was dense, chemically formulated to irritate the eyes. Hold the hostages! The leader roared, blindly swiping his massive arms. He grabbed nothing but air. The family felt something wrap around their waists. Not a hand, but something rope-like, thrumming with energy. Don't scream, a voice whispered in their ears. It wasn't a sound, it was a feeling, a vibration in the air. In a blur of motion, the father, mother, and child were yanked backward, flying through the smoke as if they weighed nothing. They landed softly on the roof of a nearby convenience store, out of the immediate line of fire. Stay down, a voice rasped from the smoke. The father looked up, squinting through the haze. He saw a silhouette standing at the edge of the smoke. Small. Ragged. Glowing with green sparks. Down in the street, the panic was setting in. Who is it? Resistance? I can't see anything. The lanky villain with the knife swung wildly. Show yourself. From the smoke, 2 black tendrils shot out. They wrapped around the lanky villain's ankles. He didn't even have time to scream. He was yanked into the purple fog with a violent whoosh. There was the sound of a dull impact, flesh hitting concrete, and then silence. Kenji? The leader shouted. Kenji, no answer. Back to back. Circle up. The remaining 5 villains pressed their backs together, guns raised, quirks active. One man's hands were glowing with fire. Another had turned his skin to steel. Come out and fight, coward! The fire user yelled. He launched a stream of flame into the smoke. The fire illuminated the fog, casting long, twisting shadows. And then they saw him. For a split second, illuminated by the flames. A pair of glowing green eyes hung in the air above them. Above, too late, Izuku descended. He didn't use a smash. He used precision. He landed in the center of their circle. He crouched low, one hand touching the ground. Black Whip exploded outward in a chaotic web. 5 tendrils. 5 targets. The whip slashed out, grabbing gun barrels, wrists, and ankles. With a torque of his torso that defied human physiology, Izuku spun. The villains were ragdolled. They smashed into each other, their heads cracking together with sickening thuds. The fire user managed to break free, aiming a blast at Izuku's face. Izuku didn't dodge. He moved through the attack. Danger sense had told him the trajectory a second before the fire was even summoned. He sidestepped the flame, closing the distance instantly. He drove a palm into the villain's solar plexus. A controlled burst of air pressure. The villain's eyes bulged. He folded like a lawn chair, gasping for air, and collapsed. Monster! The concrete leader roared. He was the only one left standing, his durability saving him from the initial whip attack. He charged, his footsteps cracking the pavement. Izuku stood his ground. He looked small compared to the charging behemoth. The villain threw a punch that could have leveled a small house. Izuku caught it. He caught the fist with one hand. The shockwave of the impact blew the remaining smoke away, clearing the street. The villain stared, eyes wide with disbelief. His fist, hard as cement, was stopped dead by a gloved hand that looked half the size. Izuku looked up. His respirator was cracked, revealing a scar that ran from the corner of his mouth up to his cheekbone. His eyes were cold. You're loud, Izuku whispered. Green lightning flared. 1 for all, 45%. Izuku twisted his wrist. The villain's arm snapped with a dry crack. The villain screamed, falling to his knees. Izuku didn't gloat. He didn't lecture. He stepped in, pivoting on his heel, and delivered a high kick to the side of the villain's head. The iron sole made contact. The villain hit the pavement, and didn't move. Silence returned to ground beta. Izuku stood over the unconscious bodies. His chest heaved slightly. The headache from danger sense was fading, replaced by the dull ache in his bones. Check them, the third user ordered. Izuku moved quickly. He stripped the villains of their weapons, bending the barrels of the guns with his bare hands. He found their supplies, water canteens, more ration bars, a small medical kit. He took it all. He wasn't stealing. He was redistributing. He sensed movement above. He looked up at the convenience store roof. The family was peering over the edge, terrified. Izuku gathered the supplies in a bundle and jumped. He landed softly on the roof, startling them. The father scrambled back, shielding his wife and daughter. Take it, Izuku said, tossing the bundle at their feet. There's water. Some food. A medkit. The father stared at the bundle, then at Izuku. He took in the tattered cape, the scarred mask, the sad eyes. Who? The father stammered. Who are you? Izuku turned away. Nobody. You're a hero, the little girl said. Her voice was small, trembling. Izuku flinched. The word felt like a physical blow. There aren't any heroes left, Izuku said, his voice hollow. Just survivors. You saved us, the mother said, stepping forward. Please. Come with us. We have a settlement near the bay. It's hidden. We don't have much, but you can rest. Rest, the fifth user sighed. God, kid, you need it. Izuku wanted to say yes. Every fiber of his exhausted being screamed to go with them, to sleep in a place where he didn't have to keep one eye open, to hear human voices that weren't in his head. But then he felt it. The phantom itch of him. The connection. If he stayed with them, he would doom them. Shigaraki hunted one for all. If Izuku stayed in one place for too long, the Noma would come. The decay would come. I can't, Izuku said. He looked at the father. Head north. Towards the mountains. The cities aren't safe. The scavengers travel the highways. Stick to the woods. Why? The girl asked. She stepped out from behind her father. She pointed to his cape. You wear the cape. Like All Might. Izuku looked down at the yellow fabric. It was stained with mud and blood. It didn't look like All Might. It looked like a shroud. All Might is gone, Izuku said softly. He walked to the edge of the roof. Wait! The father called out. If we see others, who do we say send us? Who do we thank? Izuku paused. The wind picked up again, howling through the ruins of Ground Beta. It tugged at the cape. Don't thank anyone, Izuku said. Just survive. He engaged full cowling. Green electricity crackled brighter this time. He crouched. And keep quiet, he added. With a sonic boom that shattered the remaining windows in the street, he launched himself into the sky. He didn't look back. He couldn't afford to look back. Izuku landed miles away, back at the main UA campus. He stumbled as he hit the ground. His leg gave out, and he fell to his hands and knees. He coughed, a dry, hacking sound that rattled his chest. He pulled the respirator off, spitting blood onto the concrete. Too much, he wheezed. Used too much. Breathe, the first user soothed. Just breathe, ninth. Izuku rolled onto his back, staring up at the darkening sky. The clouds were swirling, heavy with rain. He felt alone. The encounter with the family hadn't made him feel like a hero. It had made him feel like a ghost. He had interacted with the living, but he wasn't one of them. He was a relic, a weapon left over from a war that was already lost. He forced himself to stand. He had to keep moving. He couldn't sleep here. The open courtyard was too exposed. He walked toward the main gate of UA. There, standing amidst the rubble, was the statue. It was the bronze statue of All Might in his Golden Age pose, fists on his hips, head thrown back in laughter. It was ruined. Half the face had been melted away by acid. The left arm was missing. Graffiti covered the pedestal, symbols of the Paranormal Liberation Front, crude slurs, and the words False God painted in red. Izuku stood before the broken idol. He remembered the day he met Tashinori Yagi. The skinny, skeletal man who had given him everything. Who had trusted a quirkless boy with the power of the gods. Tashinori was dead. He had died 2 years ago, his body failing him in a refugee camp, passing away in his sleep. Izuku hadn't been there. He had been fighting a Gigantomachia raid 3 cities over. He hadn't even been able to say goodbye. The vestige of All Might, the spirit inside One for All, was silent. It was the only vestige that rarely spoke. Perhaps because the wound was still too fresh for both of them, Izuku reached out and touched the cold bronze of the statue's remaining boot. I'm tired, All Might, Izuku whispered. The tears finally came, cutting clean tracks through the grime on his face. I'm so tired. The wind whistled through the hollow shell of the statue. They won, Izuku said. Shigaraki won. Society is gone. I'm just delaying the inevitable. He slumped against the pedestal, sliding down until he was sitting at All Might's feet. He pulled his knees to his chest, wrapping Gran Torino's cape around himself like a blanket. No, a voice said. It wasn't a feeling. It was a voice. Deep. Resonant. Izuku looked up. The vestige of All Might shimmered in his mind's eye. It wasn't the skeletal Tashinori. It was the hero. You are not delaying the inevitable, young Midoriya, the vestige said. You are holding the line. Izuku wiped his eyes. There's no line left. There is, the first user Yoichi interjected. As long as one person remembers what it means to be a hero, the line holds. That family, Nana's voice was soft. They are alive because of you. Their world didn't end today. That matters. Izuku looked at the protein bars in his pouch. He thought of the little girl in the oversized hoodie. She asked if I was a hero, Izuku murmured. He looked up at the broken face of the statue. The smile was melted, but the eyes, the bronze eyes, seemed to stare out at the wasteland with defiance. Izuku stood up. He tightened the straps of his gauntlets. He put his respirator back on, the hiss of the air filter sealing him away from the world once more. He wasn't All Might. He couldn't smile and say everything was fine. Because it wasn't. But he was still breathing. He was still standing. I am here, Izuku whispered to the ruins. It wasn't a proclamation of victory. It was a statement of fact. He turned away from Yeihai, facing the darkness of the city beyond. The night was coming, and with it, the creatures of the dark. The Nomu would be prowling. The villains would be feasting. Izuku's eyes glowed green. Blackwhip uncoiled from his back, writhing like living shadows. "I am here," he said again, louder this time. He launched himself into the night, a green streak of lightning against the void. The hunt was on. The buzzing never stopped. It was a physical sensation, like a colony of insects nesting at the base of his skull. It was the fourth user's quirk, danger sense, but in the 3 years since the collapse, it had evolved, or perhaps devolved, into a chronic, maddening migraine. In the old world, danger was an event, a villain attack, a falling beam, a car crash. In this world, the air itself was hostile. The water was poison. The silence was a threat. Danger was no longer an event, it was the atmosphere. Izuku Midoriya walked along the cracked asphalt of a highway overpass on the outskirts of Muzidafu. The sun was high, hidden behind the eternal gray smog, baking the humidity into a suffocating blanket. He stumbled, his boot catching on an exposed expansion joint. He didn't fall. Black Whip instinctively shot out from his shoulder, tapping the guardrail to right him, but his head swam. "Sleep," the fifth user, Daigoro Banjo, urged. His presence in the vestige realm felt like a heavy, warm hand pressing down on Izuku's consciousness. "You've been awake for 70 hours, kid. The body can't run on fumes forever." "I can't," Izuku croaked. His throat felt like it was lined with sandpaper. "If I sleep, the noise gets louder." He meant the dreams. When he was awake, the danger sense was abuzz. When he slept, the ghost screamed. He looked out over the suburbs. This area used to be vibrant. Rows of houses with manicured lawns, bicycles and driveways, the smell of dinner cooking in the evenings. Now, it was a skeleton. The houses were blackened shells, burned out during the riots that followed the pro-heroes' defeat. Nature was reclaiming the wreckage. Vines choked the charred timber, and packs of wild dogs, some mutated by leaking quirk-enhancing drugs, roamed the streets below. Izuku adjusted the strap of his backpack. It contained the meager supplies he had scavenged from the scavengers yesterday, plus a few trinkets he had found in the rubble. Not food or water, but things that mattered more. A pristine All Might trading card. A broken hair clip. A scorched piece of a hero costume. Almost there, he whispered to himself. He wasn't patrolling today. Today was a pilgrimage. As he walked, the rhythm of his boots against the concrete lulled him into a trance. The buzzing in his head shifted, changing pitch, pulling him backward in time. The gray sky of the present dissolved into the blood-red sky of the past. 3 years ago. The day of collapse. The heat. That was what he remembered first. It wasn't just hot, it was an inferno. The battleground was the Jaka City ruins, but the destruction had spread like a cancer, consuming everything. Izuku was lying on his back, staring up at the smoke. His body was broken. His arms were purple, the skin cracked, glowing with the dangerous overuse of One for All. "Get up, Deku!" The voice was rough, desperate. "Katsuki Bakugo." Izuku forced his head to turn. The vision was blurry, swimming in tears and blood. Bakugo was standing a few meters away. He was in bad shape. His gauntlets were gone, his hands trembling, smoke rising from his palms. But he was standing. He was the only one standing. Beyond him, a mountain of flesh and malice rose from the dust. "Shigaraki." Or AFO. The being laughed, a sound that vibrated through the ground. "Look at them," Shigaraki's voice boomed, amplified by airwaves. "The pillars of your society." Izuku tried to move, but his legs wouldn't respond. He looked to his left. Endeavor lay face down in the dirt. The number 1 hero's flames were extinguished. His suit was shredded, his body broken by a single, casual backhand from the Demon Lord. Beside him, Hawks was pinned to a wall by black rivets, his wings nothing but burnt stumps. "No!" Izuku whispered. "Run!" Bakugo screamed. He wasn't looking at Izuku. He was looking at the others, Uraraka, Ida, Tsuyu, who were trying to drag the injured to the extraction point. "Kaken, don't!" Izuku choked out. Bakugo looked back. For the first time in their lives, there was no arrogance in his red eyes. There was no anger. Just a terrifying clarity. "I'm not letting him touch them," Bakugo said. He turned back to Shigaraki. "I'll buy you time." "Go! Dynamite!" Uraraka screamed from the extraction transport. Bakugo ignited. It wasn't his usual explosion. It was blinding. He pulled every ounce of nitroglycerin from his sweat glands, pushing his quirk beyond its singularity point. His skin began to crack, glowing bright orange. Howitzer impact! Cluster! He launched himself at the demon. A tiny spark against the void. The explosion was silent at first. A sphere of pure white light that swallowed the city block. Then came the sound, a roar that shattered Izuku's eardrums. When the light faded, Shigaraki was still standing. He was scorched, regenerating, but standing, and Bakugo. There was nothing. Just a crater. No body. No shredded costume. Just dust. How noble, Shigaraki sneered, brushing ash from his shoulder. And how pointless. Present day, Izuku gasped, stumbling to his knees on the highway. He dry-heaved, clutching his chest. The phantom pain of a broken heart was sharper than any bone fracture. Breathe, the first user commanded gently. You are here. You are alive. Ground yourself. Izuku dug his gloved fingers into the cracks of the asphalt. I'm here, he repeated the mantra. I'm here. He forced himself up. The memory of the explosion faded, but the taste of ash remained in his mouth. He left the highway, sliding down an embankment into a dense patch of forest that bordered the city. This area had been a nature preserve. Because it had no strategic value and no loot, the villains and scavengers largely ignored it. Izuku moved through the trees with practiced silence. He didn't disturb a single branch. He was part of the forest now, a predator among predators. After 20 minutes of hiking, he reached a clearing. It was a small, circular grove surrounded by ancient oak trees. The canopy was thick enough here that the sky was hidden, leaving the space in a perpetual, peaceful twilight. In the center of the clearing were stones. They weren't official gravestones. They were slabs of concrete, slate, and marble that Izuku had dragged here over the years. He had carved them himself using a small knife and the precision control of Black Whip. There were dozens of them. A graveyard of the lost generation. Izuku walked to the center. The air here was different. The danger sense quieted down to a whisper, as if the quirk itself respected the dead. He dropped his backpack and knelt before a rough, slate headstone. He pulled a rag from his pouch and a small bottle of water, precious, filtered water, and began to clean the stone. The carving read, Tenya Idea. Ingenium. I saw a runner today, Izuku said softly to the stone. Some kid in the ruins of Saitama. He was fast. Not engine fast, but fast. He was running food to his sick mother. You would have been proud of his form. Elbows tucked in. He wiped the grime from the stone, polishing the rough letters. He moved to the next one. A piece of pink granite he had found in a destroyed bank lobby. Ochako Uraraka. Uravity. Izuku's hand trembled. He rested his forehead against the cool stone. Flashback. The transport door was heavy. It was a blast door designed for sieges. The heroes were retreating. They had lost. The order had been given, save the future. Get the students out. Izuku was unconscious, strapped to a gurney inside the armored truck. Uraraka was at the door, pulling civilians inside. The air was filled with decayed dust. Anything it touched turned to gray sand. There's no room. The driver screamed. We have to seal it. The decay is spreading. There's one more group. Ochako yelled, pointing to a family trapped under debris 50 yards away. The decay wave was rushing toward them like a tsunami of dust. We can't wait. Ochako looked at Izuku's unconscious form. She touched his hand for a brief second. Her fingers were bloody, her costume torn. Take him, she said. Her voice was steady. Take him and go. Uraraka! Tsuyu cried from the back, restrained by her injuries. Ribbit! No! Ochako stepped out of the truck. She slapped the control panel on the outside. Slam! The blast doors hissed shut, locking with a mechanical thud. Through the reinforced glass viewport, Tsuyu watched. She watched her best friend run toward the trapped family. She watched Ochako touch the debris, floating it away. She saw Ochako push the family into a sewer grate, safety underground, and then she saw Ochako turn to face the wave of gray death. She floated herself, trying to rise above it, but the air was thick with flying debris. A piece of rebar caught her leg. She fell. She looked at the retreating truck. She didn't scream. She smiled. A sad, brave smile. She mouthed 2 words. Save them. Then the dust swallowed her. Present day. Izuku traced the letters of her name. I'm trying, Ochako, he whispered. I'm trying to save them. But there are so few left to save. He placed the broken hair clip he had found earlier on top of her stone. It wasn't hers. Hers was gone, but it was pink. She would have liked it. He stayed there for a long time, letting the silence wash over him. This was the only place he allowed himself to be weak. To be Izuku, not the vessel of one for all. Finally, he moved to the last stone. It stood apart from the others, at the base of the largest oak tree. It was a jagged, sharp piece of rock. It looked angry. Katsuki Bakugo. Dynamite. Izuku didn't clean this one with a rag. He placed his hand on it, activating his quirk just enough to warm the stone. You'd hate this place, Kaken, Izuku murmured, a dry smile cracking his lips. Too quiet. No extras to yell at. He sat cross-legged in front of the stone. I fought some PLF remnants yesterday. My form was sloppy. I can hear you yelling at me about it. Keep your damn guard up, Deku! Izuku chuckled, but the sound died in his throat, turning into a sob. It's getting harder, he confessed. The vestiges, they help. But they aren't here. Not really. I'm the only one left who remembers how you guys laughed. How you fought. He looked at his hands. They were scarred, rough, stained with dirt. AFO is still out there. Shigaraki is quiet, but he's out there. I feel him. He's waiting for me to break. He wants me to give up so he can take one for all without a fight. Izuku's eyes hardened. I won't give him the satisfaction. I'll keep running. I'll keep fighting. Until my legs snap. Until my heart stops. Because that's what you would have done. He reached into his pouch and pulled out the strip of the explosive gauntlet he wore on his arm. He tightened it. I'm going to win, Kaken. Even if there's nothing left to win for. He sat in silence for another hour. The sun began to set, casting long, skeletal shadows through the trees. The gray light faded into a suffocating black, and then, the silence broke. It wasn't a sound. It was a scream in his brain. Danger. It wasn't the low hum. It wasn't the buzz. It was a siren. Izuku threw himself sideways. Boom. The ground where he had been sitting exploded. Not from a bomb, but from an impact. A massive force slammed into the earth, sending dirt and shards of stone flying. Izuku rolled, coming up in a crouch, Black Whip already flaring out to anchor him to the trees. Dust filled the clearing. His sanctuary was violated. Who's there? Izuku hissed. His voice modulated into the deep, threatening growl he used for intimidation. From the dust, a figure rose. It was massive. At least 7 feet tall. It was hunched over, its arms hanging low, dragging on the ground. The skin was dark, almost black, and covered in jagged, rock-like protrusions. A high-end Nomu. But this one was different. Most Nomu were mindless beasts or chirping horrors. This one stood with a strange, twisted dignity. It stepped forward, crushing the grave of Tenya Ida under a massive, rocky foot. Izuku flinched. Get off him! The Nomu tilted its head. Its exposed brain pulsed in the dim light. It had no eyes, just a sensory strip across its forehead. Its mouth was a beak-like maw filled with razor-sharp teeth. Hard. The Nomu rasped. Izuku froze. The voice. It was distorted, layered with a guttural animal growl, but the cadence, hard. The Nomu repeated. It slammed its fists together. The sound was like 2 boulders colliding. Clack. Hard to break. Izuku's blood ran cold. The Nomu's skin shifted. The jagged rocks smoothed out, then sharpened, turning into hardened armor. No, Izuku whispered. The realization hit him like a physical blow. That's, warning, the second user barked. Emotional compromise detected. Focus, 9th. So man ly. The Nomu gurgled. It was a mockery. A twisted, sick joke engineered by All for One. It was a Nomu made from the corpse, or perhaps the captured, living body, of Eijiro Kirishima. Kirishima? Izuku choked out. The creature didn't recognize the name. It only recognized the prey. It roared, a sound of grinding stone, and lunged. It was fast. Terrifyingly fast. Izuku engaged full calling, 30%. He dodged to the left, but the Nomu anticipated it. A hardened elbow swung out, catching Izuku in the ribs. Crack! Izuku went flying. He smashed through an ancient oak tree, splintering the wood, and tumbled into the underbrush. Pain flared in his side. Broken rib. Definitely. Get up! The fourth user screamed. It's coming! Izuku scrambled to his feet just as the Nomu crashed through the fallen tree. It was a juggernaut. It didn't care about obstacles, it simply walked through them. Red Riot, Izuku gasped, coughing blood. Kirishima, it's me. It's Midoriya. The Nomu paused. For a second, just a second, the sensory strip flickered. Deku. The creature gargled. Hope flared in Izuku's chest. Yes. Yes, it's me. The creature's mouth twisted into a horrific grin. Kill. Deku. It slammed its hands into the ground. The earth erupted. Sharp spikes of rock shot up from the soil, a twisted version of Todoroki's ice wave but made of stone. Izuku jumped, using float to hover above the spikes. He's not in there, kid. Daigoro Banjo's voice was grim. That thing is a puppet. The boy you knew is gone, but he has his quirk. Izuku yelled internally, dodging a thrown boulder. He remembered my name. He was programmed to hunt you. The second user shouted. He is a weapon. Treat him like one, or you die here. And if you die, Kirishima's memory is desecrated forever. Izuku looked down at the monster. It was tearing up the graveyard. It grabbed the stone marked for Uraraka and crushed it in its hand, turning the granite to dust. No! Izuku screamed. The rage replaced the sorrow. The Nomu looked up, preparing to jump. Izuku closed his eyes for a fraction of a second. He shifted gears. Gearshift. Low to high. The world seemed to slow down. The falling leaves suspended in midair. The dust motes froze. Izuku didn't use 100%. His body couldn't take it. But with FA Gene, he could simulate it. He began to stack kinetic energy, moving his arms and legs in a blur while floating. 1 loop. 2 loops. 3 loops. The Nomu jumped. It was a missile of hardened rock aimed straight at him. Izuku opened his eyes. They glowed with a terrifying intensity. Smoke screen. Purple smoke exploded from his body, blinding the creature midair. The Nomu flailed, its target gone. Izuku dropped below the smoke. He wrapped Black Whip around the Nomu's ankle and pulled. Using the momentum of the Nomu's own jump, plus the stored energy of FA Gene, Izuku slammed the creature into the earth. The impact shook the forest. A crater formed in the center of the graveyard. The Nomu groaned, trying to push itself up. Its armor was cracked. Izuku landed on the edge of the crater. He wasn't crying anymore. I'm sorry, Eijiro, Izuku whispered. He activated transmission. He moved so fast he ceased to be visible. He was a sonic boom contained in a human form. First gear. A punch to the gut, shattering the rock armor. Second gear. A kick to the jaw, breaking the beak. Third gear. A double fist smash to the shoulders, pinning the creature down. The Nomu tried to harden, to become unbreakable. But One for All, fueled by 8 generations of will, was stronger than stone. Overdrive, Izuku murmured. He delivered a final, open palm strike to the creature's exposed brain. He didn't use lethal force to the brain stem. He couldn't bring himself to execute his friend's body. But he delivered a concussive blast designed to shut down the motor functions permanently. Detroit smash, pinpoint. The shockwave was focused. It went through the creature, blowing out the dirt beneath it. The Nomu convulsed once. Then it went limp. Its hardened skin began to crumble, turning into gray ash, leaving only the dark, modified flesh beneath. Silence returned to the forest. But it was a heavy, broken silence. Izuku stood over the body. His chest heaved. Blood dripped from his nose and his side. He looked around. The graveyard was destroyed. Uraraka's stone was dust. Ida's stone was rubble. The sanctuary was gone. He fell to his knees beside the Nomu. He reached out and touched the creature's shoulder. It felt cold. I'm sorry, he wept. I'm so sorry. He sat there for minutes, maybe hours. The adrenaline faded, leaving him trembling. Look at the neck, the third user said. His voice was sharp, analytical. Izuku wiped his eyes. What? The neck? There's something there. Izuku leaned in. Embedded in the thick muscle of the Noma's neck, hidden under a flap of skin, was a small, blinking device. Izuku dug it out with his knife. It was a chip. Advanced tech. A tracker? Izuku asked. No, the first user said, his voice filled with dread. A recorder. Izuku froze. It wasn't just sent to kill you, the second user realized. It was sent to test you. To record your current speed, your reaction times, your psychological state. Izuku crushed the chip in his hand. They're learning, Izuku realized. A chill that had nothing to do with the night air settled in his bones. They knew I would be here. They knew about the graveyard. How? How could they know? He had never told anyone. He had built this place in secret, unless they had access to the memories of the people he loved. If they had turned Kirishima, did they have the others? Did they extract their memories before they turned them? The thought was so horrifying Izuku nearly vomited. He stood up. He couldn't stay here. The sanctuary was compromised. Nowhere was safe. He looked at the ruin of the graveyard one last time. I can't come back, he whispered to the rubble. If I come back, I bring the war to you. He turned his back on the only place that brought him peace. He adjusted his backpack, wincing at the pain in his ribs. The danger sense was buzzing again, a low, constant threat. The Noma wasn't alone. There would be retrieval drones. Or worse. Izuku looked up at the sky. The clouds parted slightly, revealing a sliver of the moon. It looked like a closing eye. You want a war? Izuku hissed at the darkness. You want data? Green lightning crackled around him, wild and jagged. I'll give you data. He leaped into the trees, leaving the body of the monster that wore his friend's face behind. He moved faster than before, driven by a cold, sharp terror. The hunt had changed. He wasn't just the last hero wandering the wasteland. He was the prey in a game he didn't understand, and the hunters were wearing the faces of his family. The darkness of the Tokyo underground was different from the darkness of the surface. Above, the night was a bruised purple, illuminated by the sickly glow of chemical fires and the harsh searchlights of the villain empire's patrols. Below, in the bowels of the subway system, the darkness was absolute. It was a heavy, physical weight that pressed against the eyes, a suffocating velvet that smelled of stagnant water, rat droppings, and the copper tang of old blood. Izuku Midoriya sat in the corner of a maintenance alcove on the Ginza line, deep beneath what used to be the glitter and glamour of the shopping district. The tunnel had collapsed 300 meters to the east, and the western entrance was rigged with enough crude explosives to bring the ceiling down on anyone foolish enough to follow him. It was his tomb. It was his home. He hissed through his teeth as he tightened the bandage around his torso. The rib wasn't shattered. One for all had made his bones denser than steel, but it was cracked. The hairline fracture throbbed with a dull, sickening rhythm that matched his heartbeat. Every breath was a negotiation with pain. Too tight, the fifth user, Daigoro Banjo, grumbled in the back of his mind. The sensation was like a rough, calloused hand hovering over Izuku's own. You cut off the circulation, you lose the muscle. Lose the muscle, you lose the fight. If I don't bind it tight, it shifts when I move, Izuku whispered into the silence. His voice was a dry rasp, unused. And I have to move. You have to heal, the fifth countered. But we don't have that luxury, do we? Izuku ignored him, pulling the tape taut with a wet tearing sound. He leaned back against the cold concrete wall, letting the sensation of the damp stones seep into his feverish skin. He was shirtless, his body a map of the war. The scars were a history book written in flesh. The starburst burns on his arms from his early days. The jagged slash across his chest from Shigaraki's first awakening. The puncture wounds on his legs from the high-end raids. And now, the fresh, angry purple bruise blossoming on his side where the Kirishima Noma had struck him. Kirishima. The name floated through his mind like a jagged piece of glass. He closed his eyes, and instantly, the image was there. The dark, rocky skin. The mindless eyes. The way the creature had said manly as it tried to crush his skull. Izuku's hand clenched into a fist, striking his thigh. Don't, the second user's voice cut through the mental haze. It was sharp, cold, and commanding. Do not dwell on it. That thing was not your friend. It was a biological drone wearing a mask. You destroyed the hardware. That is all. He remembered me, Izuku whispered, opening his eyes to stare at the single, flickering LED lantern on the floor. For a second. He knew me. Glitch in the programming, the second dismissed. Sentimentality will get you killed, ninth. You hesitated. You let it hit you because you hesitated. Next time, it won't be a rib. It will be your heart. There won't be a next time, Izuku muttered. I killed him. You decommissioned a weapon, the second corrected. Change your language. Change your mindset. You are a soldier in occupied territory, not a student in a classroom. Izuku didn't argue. He didn't have the energy. The hunger was gnawing at his stomach again, a hollow ache that felt like it was eating him from the inside out. He reached for his pack and pulled out one of the protein bars he had scavenged from the UA freezer. He stared at the wrapper. Nutri-Balance, chocolate flavor. He unwrapped it slowly, savoring the sound of the foil. He took a small bite. It tasted like sawdust and expired chemicals. He chewed it thoroughly, forcing himself to swallow. The alcove was cluttered with the debris of his existence. A sleeping bag that smelled of mildew. A stack of old maps marked with X's and circles. A portable water filter. And his gear. He looked at the pile of metal and fabric sitting on a crate. The mid-gauntlets, scratched and dented but still functional. The iron saws. The cape. And the radio. It was a bulky, ugly thing, a Frankenstein of technology. It looked like a car radio had mated with a military satellite phone. Wires protruded from the casing, wrapped in electrical tape. An oversized antenna was jury-rigged to the side. It was the last thing Mei Hatsum had given him before the workshop collapsed. It's omni-frequency, muscles! She had shouted over the sound of explosions, her goggles covered in soot. It scans everything! Police bands, villain comms, old radio waves, even encrypted hero channels if any still exist. Don't break my baby. She had shoved him into the escape tunnel and turned back to hold the line with her support items. He never saw her again. Izuku reached out and pulled the radio closer. It was his ritual. Every night, before the nightmares claimed him, he listened to the world that wanted him dead. He flicked the switch. The device hummed to life, the small amber screen casting a ghostly light on his face. Static. He turned the dial slowly. Sector 4 clear. No sign of the rabbit. Villain patrol chatter. Low-level grunts. Izuku noted the frequency and the sector. They were patrolling the warehouse district again. Good. That meant the sewers were clear. He kept turning. Praise be to the Liberator. The age of quarks is the age of freedom. Propaganda broadcast. Redestro's old manifesto, looped endlessly on the public speakers in the occupied cities. He turned again. Water rations cut to half. Anyone found hoarding will be subject to public decay. Civilian Management Channel. Shigaraki's administrative cruelty. Izuku listened for an hour. It was always the same. Reports of misery. Reports of hunting. Silence where hope used to be. Nothing tonight, Izuku sighed. He reached to turn it off. Wait. The sensation came from the first user, Yoichi. A gentle tug on his consciousness. Go back. 3 clicks. Izuku paused. His hand hovered over the dial. There was nothing there. Just white noise. Listen closer, Yoichi urged. Beneath the static. Izuku frowned. He turned the dial back 3 notches. Hiss. Pop crrrack. White noise. The sound of the atmosphere. But then, a rhythm. It wasn't a voice. It was a pattern in the static. A repetitive clicking sound faint buried under the wash of interference. Click click click. Pause. Click click click. Pause. Click click click. Morse code? Izuku whispered. SOS? No, the third user analyzed. Too fast. Too irregular for standard SOS. It's a carrier wave. Someone is trying to punch a signal through the jamming blanket. Izuku adjusted the fine-tuning knob. He engaged gearshift just for a microsecond on his fingers, giving him the superhuman precision needed to turn the dial a fraction of a millimeter. The static cleared. A voice cut through the darkness. It wasn't a strong signal. It sounded terrified, breathless, and young. Can anyone Bluebird? Repeating Bluebird. Izuku froze. His heart hammered against his cracked rib, sending a spike of pain through his chest that he barely registered. He knew that voice. It had matured. It was deeper, less fragile than he remembered, but the timbre was unmistakable. It was the voice that had cried out to him from an alleyway years ago. Eri, he breathed. The vestiges went silent. The mental clamor ceased instantly. Izuku pressed the radio against his ear, his hand trembling. Come on. Come on, clear up. This is Eri. If any heroes are left, we are at the Tartarus ruins. Please. The timeline is, he's accelerating it. We can't, the voice cracked, dissolving into a sob before stabilizing. Project Kronos. He's going to erase it. Everything. We are in the lower levels. Subsection D. Please. If you can hear this. Lemillion. Deku, anyone. The signal wavered, overtaken by a harsh, grinding electronic screech, jamming software kicking in, and then the loop restarted. Can anyone Bluebird? Izuku stared at the amber light of the radio. Eri. She was alive. For 3 years he had assumed she was gone. Taken by AFO. Hidden away in some vault to be used as a rewind battery, or killed to prevent her power from ever threatening the villains. The thought of her fate had been one of the darkest shadows haunting him. But she was free. Or at least, free enough to broadcast. Tartarus, Izuku said, the word tasting like ash. It's a trap, the second user said immediately. His voice was absolute. Turn it off, ninth. It is a lure. It's Eri, Izuku argued, his voice rising. Exactly, the second countered. Think. Use your head, not your bleeding heart. Who controls the airwaves? They do. Who controls Tartarus? They do. How does a teenage girl break into a high-security fortress, find a transmitter powerful enough to punch through the interference, and broadcast on a hero frequency without being stopped? Maybe she escaped, Izuku said. She has her quirk. She could have rewound the lock. Or the guards, and then went to Tartarus? The second scoffed. The most heavily fortified location in Japan outside of the capital? Why? She said Project Kronos, Izuku muttered. She said he's accelerating it. Bait, the second insisted. Specific bait designed to trigger you. They know you care about the girl. They know you're the only one stupid enough to try and save her. Kudo is right, the fourth user, Haiku Shinomori, added softly. The danger sense, can you feel it? Even thinking about that location makes the quirk spike. Izuku focused. They were right. The buzzing in his head had intensified the moment he identified the location. A warning. A premonition of death. It's a trap, Izuku admitted. He slumped back against the wall. Good, the second said. Then we ignore it. We move camp. If they are broadcasting this, they are triangulating listeners. But what if it isn't? The question hung in the damp air. It was Nana Shimura who spoke next. Her presence was warm, motherly, but filled with a steel core. Izuku. She called for Lemillion, Izuku whispered. Tears pricking his eyes. Mirio is dead. Night Eye is dead. Sir is dead. She doesn't know. She thinks there are still heroes. If you go there, you die, the second said. And one for all goes to Shigaraki. The world ends. Permanently. The world has already ended. Izuku snapped. He stood up, ignoring the pain in his ribs. He paced the small confines of the alcove, his shadow dancing wildly against the concrete. Look around. He gestured to the damp walls. We're hiding in a hole. Eating rats and expired paste. We aren't winning. We aren't even fighting. We're just existing. Survival is resistance, the fourth noted. No, Izuku said. Survival is survival. Resistance means fighting back. He looked at the radio, where the loop was playing again. Bluebird. That was the code name Aizawa had given her during the transfer to Yui dorms. If there's a 1% chance that she is there, Izuku said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous register, and a 1% chance that she is scared and waiting for someone to save her. He walked over to the crate. He picked up the mid-gauntlets. He slid his arms into them. The metal clicked and whirred as the support item synced with his bioelectric signature. Then I have to go. You are walking into a slaughter, the second warned. I forbid it. As a predecessor, I forbid you from throwing this power away. Izuku stopped. He closed his eyes and entered the vestige world. It was a void of swirling lights. The 7 chairs were arranged in a circle. The second user, Kudo, stood with his arms crossed, his face scarred and stern. Izuku stood before him. He wasn't the crying child from the sports festival anymore. He was a scarred titan in his own right. You don't get to forbid me, Izuku said calmly. You gave me this power. You entrusted it to me. And All Might taught me what to do with it. He looked at the misty form of All Might, standing silently in the back. Meddling when you don't need to, Izuku quoted, is the essence of being a hero. He turned back to Kudo. If she is bait, then I'll eat the bait. I'll spring the trap. And then I'll break the teeth of the hunter. Kudo stared at him for a long moment. Then, he let out a sharp sigh. You are just like him. Reckless. Emotional. Suicidal. Kudo turned away, but his posture relaxed. Fine. If you're going to die, do it with your boots on. Izuku opened his eyes. He was back in the tunnel. He began to move with purpose. The hesitation was gone. The fear remained. It was always there, but it was shoved into the engine, fuel for the fire. He checked his smoke bombs. 4 canisters left. Not enough. He would need to improvise. He checked the iron soles. The tread was worn, the impact absorbers nearing their limit. They would have to hold. He picked up the cape. Gran Torino's cape. He fastened it around his neck. It was heavy with the weight of legacy. He reached for the radio. He didn't turn it off. He crushed it. He squeezed his hand, metal and plastic shattering under the pressure of One for All. He couldn't leave it for anyone to find. He couldn't let them track the signal back to this bolt hole. Bluebird, Izuku whispered. I'm coming. He turned to the tunnel exit. The explosive trap. He didn't disarm it. He triggered the timer. 5 minutes. He needed to be gone before it blew. He needed to be ghosts again. He engaged full cowling. The green lightning illuminated the tunnel, casting harsh shadows. The rats scurried away into the cracks. Danger sense, Izuku commanded internally. Focus. Tartarus. Give me a read. The buzzing spiked. It was a crescendo of pain. It told him that death was waiting in the Bay of Osaka. It told him that demons were gathering. Good, Izuku said, a grim smile touching his scarred lips. Let them gather. He crouched, the concrete cracking under his boots. One for All, 20%. He launched himself down the tunnel. The run to the surface was a blur of motion. He navigated the labyrinth of the subway system by memory and instinct. He vaulted over turnstiles, wall-ran across collapsed tracks, and smashed through boarded-up maintenance doors. He emerged into the night air near the ruins of the Tokyo station. The rain had started. It was a cold, acidic rain that stung the skin. The city was a jagged silhouette of ruin against the weeping sky. Tartarus was miles away. It was an island fortress, connected to the mainland by a single, now destroyed bridge. How do we get there? The fifth fast? Run? Too slow, Izuku thought. And too visible. If I run on the water, the spray will give me away to aerial patrols. Float? Nana suggested. Too slow against the wind. I need speed. Izuku looked around the ruins of the station. His eyes landed on a twisted piece of metal jutting from a collapsed parking structure. A motorcycle. It was a wreck. But the frame was intact. No gas, Izuku muttered. And the engine is seized. You don't need an engine, the third user pointed out. You are the engine. Izuku approached the bike. He ripped the heavy debris off it. The tires were flat, rotted away. Black whip, Izuku said. Tendrils of black energy shot from his back. He wove them around the wheels, creating makeshift tires of pure energy. He wrapped more tendrils around the handlebars and the frame, creating a harness. He straddled the bike. It was heavy, dead weight. F.A. Gene, he whispered. He began to pulse his muscles. Build up. Store. Gearshift. He touched the bike. He applied the quirk to the object, altering its inertia. It became light as a feather. Let's go. He kicked off. Using Black Whip like a slingshot, he launched himself and the bike forward. Once in motion, he used the whips to grab street lights, building corners, debris, pulling himself forward, accelerating the bike like an erratic pendulum. He moved through the streets of Tokyo, a silent, green-glowing rider on a dead machine. As he reached the edge of the bay, the open water stretched out before him. The ruins of the Tartarus Bridge loomed in the distance, a dark shape against the darker horizon. The fortress was lit up. Searchlights swept the water. There was activity. Look, the sixth user, N, pointed out. The lights. They aren't random. Izuku slowed, skidding to a halt behind a shipping container on the docks. He peered through the rain. The searchlights on Tartarus were sweeping in a pattern. But there was a gap. A blind spot on the northern seawall. Every 40 seconds, the lights diverged, leaving a 10-second window of darkness. Intentional? Izuku asked. Or a malfunction, the third said. The facility is ruined. Systems are degrading. Or, Nana said softly, someone hacked the pattern. Someone on the inside. Eri. Izuku felt a surge of adrenaline. She was doing it. She was making a path for him. She's fighting, Izuku said. She's opening the door. He looked at the water. It was choppy, dark, and undoubtedly filled with sensors. I can't take the bike, he said. He abandoned the machine. He stood on the edge of the dock. Float, he commanded. He rose into the air. He didn't fly high. That would silhouette him against the clouds. He hovered just inches above the chaotic waves, blending in with the sea spray. He waited. 38, 39. The searchlights split. The gap opened. Now, Izuku engaged Black Whip. He shot a tendril out, aiming for a destroyed pylon in the water, then another, swinging low and fast. He moved like a skipping stone, touching the water only briefly before launching again. He covered the distance in seconds. He reached the base of the massive sea wall of Tartarus. He slammed into the concrete, his fingers digging into the wet surface to hold on. He hung there, suspended above the crashing waves, hidden in the shadow of the wall. Above him, the searchlight swung back, illuminating the spot he had been in just seconds ago. He held his breath. Nothing happened. No alarms. No gunfire. He was in. Phase 1 complete, the second user said grudgingly. Now the hard part. You have to get inside without tripping the internal sensors. And you have to find the girl before the monster finds you. Izuku looked up the sheer face of the wall. It was slick, formidable, and radiated menace. Danger senses screaming, Izuku noted. The headache was blinding now. It felt like his skull was going to split. Block it out, the fourth advised. Focus on the task. Izuku gritted his teeth. I'm coming, Eri. He began to climb. Inside Tartarus. Deep within the bowels of the prison, in a room that smelled of ozone and despair, a young girl sat in front of a bank of monitors. She was older now. Her white hair was chopped short, jagged, as if cut with a knife. A small, spiraling horn protruded from her forehead, glowing faintly. She wore a stolen guard's uniform that was too big for her. Her hands flew across a keyboard. Come on, she whispered. Come on, Deku. Be out there. Please be out there. Behind her, in the shadows, something shifted. He is coming, a voice hissed. It wasn't human. It was dry and cold. Eri didn't turn around. She kept typing. I know. The master is pleased, the voice continued. The rabbit enters the snare. Eri stopped typing. She looked at the screen. A blip had just appeared on the perimeter sensors. A ghost signal. Too fast for a boat. Too low for a plane. She smiled. A fierce, desperate smile. He's not a rabbit, Eri said, her horn glowing brighter. He's a storm. She hit the enter key. Security protocol, override. Sector D unlocked, and I just opened the gates. The sea wall of Tartarus was a monolith of black concrete, slick with algae and the oily residue of the dead ocean. It rose 200 feet into the air, a tombstone marking the grave of justice. Izuku Midoriya clung to the side of it like a spider. His fingers, reinforced by the pressure of One for All, dug into the microscopic imperfections of the surface. The wind howled around him, carrying the stinging spray of the bay, but he didn't shiver. He didn't have the energy to spare for shivering. 70 feet to the intake vents, the fourth user, Haiku Shinomori, whispered in his mind. The sensation was a cool, analytical pressure at the base of his skull. Patrol drone approaching. 12 o'clock high. Izuku froze. He pressed his body flat against the cold, wet concrete, blending into the shadows. Above him, the whine of a turbine engine cut through the wind. A spotlight swept down, a cone of blinding white light dancing across the water below. It traced the wall, inching closer to Izuku's position. Hold, the second user commanded. The light passed over Izuku's head, missing him by inches. The drone hovered for a moment, its mechanical eye dilating as it scanned the waves for heat signatures. Finding nothing but the cold sea, it banked away, returning to its perimeter loop. Izuku exhaled, a puff of steam that was instantly snatched away by the gale. Moving, he whispered. He reached up, finding a rusted rebar handle. With a flex of his shoulder muscles, he hauled himself upward. He moved with a rhythmic, terrifying efficiency. Reach. Pull. Hold. Reach. Pull. Hold. He was infiltrating the heart of the enemy. Tartarus had once been the ultimate prison, a place where the worst of humanity were kept away from the light. Now, under the rule of the villain empire, it had become something far worse. It was a fortress, a capital, a factory. Izuku reached the intake vent. It was a massive steel grate, 10 feet wide, vibrating with the hum of the air circulation fans deep within. Danger sense? Izuku queried internally. Quiet here, the fourth replied. But inside, it's a hornet's nest. Izuku gripped the bars of the grate. They were thick as his arm, reinforced titanium alloy. One for all, 15%. Green lightning sparked faintly across his skin, illuminating the rust on the metal. He didn't yank the grate. That would make noise. He applied slow, steady pressure. The metal groaned, a low-pitched sound masked by the wind. The bolt sheared off with a dull pop. Izuku slid the grate aside, balancing it carefully on the ledge. He slipped into the darkness of the shaft. The smell hit him instantly. It wasn't just the smell of machinery and ozone. It was the smell of unwashed bodies, of fear, of cooking meat that didn't smell like pork or beef. It was the smell of a society that had rotted from the inside out. He crawled through the ductwork. The map of Tartarus, memorized years ago from the hero briefings he had been part of as a student, was burned into his mind. But the map was old. The villains had modified the structure. Walls had been knocked down. New tunnels bored. He reached a junction that looked down into Sector C. He peered through the slats of the vent. What he saw made his blood run cold. It was a cavernous hall, once a cell block for mutation-type villains. The cells were gone. The floor had been cleared to create a massive, open-air workshop. Hundreds of people were down there. They were gaunt, their clothes rags. They were chained together in lines. Some were quirkless, others had weak, non-combat quirks, a glowing finger, a slightly elongated neck. They were working. Hammering scrap metal. Mixing chemicals in vats. Assembling crude weapons. Walking among them were the overseers. Villains. They wore pieces of stolen hero armor, a shoulder pad from a sidekick here, a helmet from a rescue hero there, painted over with the symbol of the Liberation Front. They carried electric prods and whips. Crack! A whip lashed out. A man carrying a crate of ammunition stumbled and fell. Get up, maggot! An overseer shouted. He was a lizard-type mutant, his scales painted red. He kicked the fallen man in the ribs. The master needs these shells by dawn. The man curled into a ball, shielding his head. Please. I haven't eaten in 2 days. You eat when the quota is met. The lizard raised his boot to stomp on the man's skull. In the vent, Izuku's hand crushed the metal slat he was holding. Don't, the second user hissed. The mission comes first. You save him, you alert the whole facility. You lose the girl. He's going to kill him, Nana Shimura argued, her voice trembling with rage. Izuku's eyes were wide, staring at the brutality below. This was the world Shigaraki had built. A world of absolute freedom, for the strong. For everyone else, it was hell. The lizard's boot came down, thwip. A tiny, black projectile shot from the darkness of the ceiling. It was a rivet, torn from the ductwork, flicked with the precision of a bullet using FA gene. It struck the lizard villain in the knee joint. There was a wet crunch. The lizard screamed, his leg buckling the wrong way. He collapsed, missing the slave entirely. Sniper! The lizard howled, clutching his shattered knee. We have a sniper! Panic erupted on the floor. The overseer scrambled for cover, looking up at the catwalks, not the ceiling vents. The slaves huddled together, confused. In the chaos, the man on the floor crawled away into the shadows of a heavy machine press. High above, Izuku was already moving. Reckless, the second scolded, though there was no real heat in his voice. You gave away your position. I created a distraction, Izuku countered, crawling faster. They're looking for a sniper on the catwalks. They aren't looking for a ghost in the walls. You're getting better at lying to yourself, the second noted dryly. Izuku ignored him. He pushed deeper into the facility. He was descending. Ares' signal had come from the sublevels. The roots of the mountain. As he moved, the environment changed. The industrial workshops gave way to something more opulent and grotesque. He passed over a ventilation grill looking down into what used to be the warden's office. It was now a banquet hall. Long tables were piled high with food, fresh fruit, roasted meats, wine. Things Izuku hadn't seen in years. Feasting at the tables were high-ranking villains. He recognized a few faces from the wanted posters of the old world. A bank robber. A serial killer. They were laughing, drunk and glutinous, while 10 floors above them, slaves starved. The throne of ash, Izuku whispered. He felt a burning in his chest. It wasn't the injury. It was the injustice. It was the sheer, overwhelming unfairness of it all. Focus, the first user Yoichi said gently. Don't let the anger consume you. Channel it. Use it. Izuku closed his eyes for a second, centering himself. Save Eri. Stop the suffering. In that order, he reached the main vertical shaft that led to the sublevels. The air here was colder. The hum of the fans was replaced by a low, rhythmic thrumming sound. Pulse, the fifth user, Banjo, noted. Like a heartbeat. Izuku dropped out of the vent, landing silently on a maintenance gantry. He was now in the Tartarus pit, the deepest level of the prison. This area was supposed to be sealed off, used only for the most dangerous threat, all for one himself, before his escape. Now, it was the center of operations. The lighting here was dim, red emergency strips casting long, bloody shadows. The walls were lined with massive server banks, blinking frantically, and guards. There were so many guards, but they weren't human. Standing at attention in the corridors were Noma. Not the high-ends, but the near-high-ends. Gray skin. Exposed brains. Dead eyes. They stood perfectly still, like statues, waiting for a command. There's 50 of them, Izuku breathed, peering over the railing. Maybe more. Can you fight them? Nana asked. Not without bringing the roof down, Izuku assessed. They're too durable. I'd have to go 100% to take them all out quickly. The shockwaves would collapse the ocean tunnel. Stealth it is, the sixth user, and said. Get ready, kid. It's showtime. Izuku took a deep breath. He reached into his core, pulling on his quirk, smokescreen. But he didn't just release it. He mixed it. He used the air pressure control of One for All to compress the smoke, making it denser, heavier. He dropped a smoke bomb, one of his last ones, as a catalyst. PSSSHHHH. Purple fog exploded into the corridor below. It rolled over the floor like a living thing, swallowing the red lights, swallowing the Noma. The creatures chirped, confused. Their visual sensors were blinded. They relied on sight and simple commands. Izuku dropped into the smoke. He was invisible. He moved through the herd of monsters. He was less than a foot away from them. He could smell the chemicals used to preserve their flesh. A Noma turned, sniffing the air. A massive hand swiped blindly at the smoke. Izuku ducked under the swing. He didn't engage. He flowed around them like water. He reached the blast door at the end of the corridor. It was sealed. Electronic lock, the third user analyzed. High encryption. I don't have time to hack it, Izuku thought. He placed his hand on the keypad. One for all, 100%. Not in his whole body. Just in his index finger. Flick. He drove his finger straight through the steel panel, destroying the circuitry inside. Sparks showered down. The locking mechanism fused, then shattered under the force. The heavy doors groaned and began to slide open, stuck halfway. Izuku squeezed through the gap. He was inside the control center. The room was vast, filled with the hum of supercomputers. Cables ran across the floor like snakes, all feeding into a central terminal. And there she was, standing by the main console. Her back to him was a figure. She wore a mishmash of tactical gear, a Kevlar vest that was too big, combat boots, and a gray cloak. She turned around as the door hissed shut behind him. Izuku stopped. The memory of the frightened little girl with the bandages was gone. Eri was tall. She was thin, wiry like a runner. Her white hair was chopped short in a rough bob. A scar ran through her left eyebrow. Her red eyes were wide, sunken with exhaustion, but burning with a fierce intelligence. Her horn was glowing. She held a pistol in her hands, a standard-issue guard's sidearm. She had it leveled at the door. When she saw the green glowing figure emerge from the smoke, the gun lowered. Her lip trembled. Deku? The name hung in the air, heavy with 3 years of absence. Izuku powered down. The lightning faded. He pulled down his respirator, revealing his scarred face. I'm here, Eri, he said softly. I told you I'd come. The pistol clattered to the floor. Eri ran. She crossed the distance in a heartbeat and slammed into him. It wasn't a hug, it was a collision. She buried her face in his chest, her hands gripping his cape so tightly her knuckles turned white. You're real, she sobbed. You're actually real. I thought I was hallucinating. Izuku wrapped his arms around her. She felt so fragile, yet so strong. I got your message, he said, stroking her hair. I heard you. She pulled back, wiping her eyes with the back of her dirty hand. She looked at him, scanning his injuries. You look terrible. Izuku managed a weak smile. You should see the other guy. Which other guy? All of them. Eri laughed, a wet choke sound. But then her expression hardened. The soldier returned. We don't have time, she said. He knows you're here. Who? The director. AFO's proxy. She turned back to the console. I scrambled the internal sensors, but they're rebooting. We have maybe 5 minutes before they flood this room with gas. Izuku stepped up to the console. You said Project Kronos? What is it? Eri typed a command, bringing up a schematic on the massive screen. It showed the globe. He's done with Japan, Eri said, her voice cold. He wants the world. But the other nations, America, Europe, they have their own heroes. Their own defenses. They nuked the borders to keep the Nomu out. She pointed to a satellite array on the schematic. So he's building a broadcast tower. Here. In Tartarus. A broadcast tower? It amplifies quirks, Eri explained. Specifically, mental quirks. Fear induction. Despair projection. He's going to broadcast a signal that amplifies the latent anxiety in every human being on the planet. He calls it the Great Silence. Izuku stared at the screen. He wants to break the world's will to fight before he even invades. If he turns that tower on, Eri said, humanity just gives up. Civilization collapses globally within a week. We have to destroy it, Izuku said. That's why I'm here, Eri said. She pulled a drive from the console. I uploaded a virus to the cooling systems. If they try to power it up, the core will overheat and melt down. But I needed someone to get us out before I triggered it. Us? Izuku asked. Eri nodded. She walked to the shadowed corner of the room, behind the server banks. It's okay, she whispered. He's the hero. He's safe. From the shadows, figures emerged. Izuku's breath hitched. Children. There were 6 of them. None older than 10. They were ragged, terrified, clutching stuffed animals or pieces of blanket. These are the seeds, Eri said softly. The children of pro-heroes who were captured. Or children with strong quirks that AFO wanted to harvest. She put a hand on the shoulder of a young boy with blue hair. This is Koda. Izuku looked at the boy. The water hose hero's nephew. The boy he had saved from Muscular so long ago. He was older now, his eyes hard and angry. He wore a red hat with horns. Hey, Koda muttered, looking at the floor. And Satsuki, Eri pointed to a girl with frog-like features. Tsuyu's younger sister. Izuku felt his heart breaking all over again. He kept them here? Izuku asked, his voice trembling with rage. In the dark? He calls them livestock, Eri said, spitting the word out. Spare parts for Nomu. Or leverage against any surviving resistance. She looked at Izuku. I broke them out of the nursery 2 hours ago. We've been hiding here. But I can't get them past the wall alone. I can rewind the injuries, but I can't fight an army. Izuku looked at the group. 6 children. And Eri. He looked at the exit. Getting in was hard, Izuku murmured. Getting out with them. It's impossible, the second user stated flatly. Stealth is broken. You have civilians. Non-combatants. You will be slow. You will be vulnerable. We have to try, Nana said. We are heroes. I know, the second replied. I'm just stating the odds. Izuku knelt down in front of the children. He tried to make his face look less scary, less like a skull mask. My name is Izuku, he said. I was a friend of your parents. I'm going to get you out of here. Are you All Might? A small girl asked. Izuku shook his head. No. But I'm the next best thing. He stood up. He looked at Eri. Can you run? I can run, Eri said. She pulled a second pistol from her belt and handed it to Kota. Watch the rear. Kota doesn't need a gun, Izuku said gently, taking it away. I'll watch the rear. And the front. And the sides. He activated his comms, though he knew no one was listening. It was habit. Formation, Izuku ordered. Eri point. Kids in the middle. I'm rear guard. We move fast. No stopping. If you see a villain, you duck. I handle it. Understood? The kids nodded, terrified but obedient. Let's go. They moved out of the control room, back into the smoke-filled corridor. The smoke was clearing now, dissipating into wisps. The Noma were gone. Where did they go? Eri whispered, scanning the hall. They were recalled, Izuku said, the danger sense buzzing like a circular saw in his brain. They're setting up a kill box. They reached the elevator shaft. The elevator was dead, the cables cut. We climb, Izuku said. He used Black Whip to create a harness, linking all the children together. Float, he commanded. He lifted them. All of them. The strain was immense. It wasn't just physical weight. It was the mental tax of maintaining the quirk on 7 other people while watching for threats. They rose through the shaft, passing floor after floor of the dark fortress. They reached the surface level, the main courtyard of Tartarus. The blast doors to the outside were open. Moonlight spilled onto the wet concrete of the courtyard. It was raining heavily now. The exit! Kota shouted, pointing to the open gate. Wait! Izuku screamed. Danger! The sensation was so strong it dropped Izuku to his knees. It wasn't a buzz. It was a spear through his brain. Get back! He shoved the children behind a concrete barrier just as the world exploded. Boom! A projectile slammed into the ground exactly where they had been standing a millisecond before. The concrete vaporized. Izuku rolled, coming up in a crouch, shielding the group with his body. He looked across the courtyard. Standing atop the highest guard tower, silhouetted against the lightning-streaked sky, was a figure. She held a rifle. But the rifle wasn't a weapon she held. It was a part of her arm. Her hair was blue and pink, matted and wet. Her right arm was a twisted mass of organic metal, fused into a sniper barrel that extended 5 feet. Lady Nagant. But she wasn't the woman Izuku had fought years ago. Her skin was gray. Her eyes were glowing purple. Cables ran from her skull into the tower's power grid. She was a revenant. A Noma built on the chassis of the world's greatest sniper. Target acquired, Nagant's voice boomed over the courtyard speakers. It was mechanical, stripped of humanity. The rabbit. Nagant! Izuku yelled. It's me! Midoriya! She didn't blink. She didn't hesitate. Bang! The second shot was faster. It curved. It bent around the wind, defying physics. Izuku saw it coming. The danger sense drew the trajectory in his mind in red light. He couldn't dodge. If he dodged, it would hit Eri. He raised his left arm. He concentrated one for all into his gauntlet. Clang! The bullet struck his forearm. The impact skidded him backward 10 feet, his boots carving trenches in the concrete. The gauntlet shattered. His arm went numb. She's strong, Izuku hissed. Stronger than before. She's plugged into the mainframe, Ares shouted over the wind. She has infinite ammo. She's drawing biomass from the tower. More figures appeared on the walls surrounding the courtyard. Hundreds of them. Scavengers. Noma. Drones. They lined the walls like gargoyles. They didn't attack. They just watched. A slow handclap echoed through the courtyard. From the shadows of the main gate, a screen descended. It flickered to life. The face of All for One appeared. He was smiling. A calm, paternal smile. Izuku Midoriya, the voice purred. I was wondering when you would come for the little time traveler. Izuku stood up, clutching his numb arm. He stood between the army and the children. Let them go, Izuku said. This is between you and me. Oh, but it isn't, AFO chuckled. Everything is between you and me. You are the last ember of a dying fire. And I have brought the ocean. The screen flickered. Lady Nagant, AFO commanded. Clipping the wings, the sniper on the tower leveled her rifle again. The barrel began to glow red-hot. She isn't just shooting bullets, Izuku realized. She's charging a railgun shot. She's going to level the entire courtyard, the third user warned. You can't tank that. Not with the kids. Izuku looked at Eri. She was terrified. Eri, Izuku said. His voice was calm. Yeah? When I move, you run. You take them to the seawall. You jump. I'll catch you. What are you going to do? Izuku turned to face the tower. Green lightning exploded around him. Not the flicker of 20%. Not the hum of 45%. The air pressure dropped. The rain stopped falling around him, vaporized by the sheer energy radiating from his body. His hair stood on end. His eyes glowed with a spectral white light. One for all, 100%, he whispered. The ground beneath him cracked. I'm going to break the gun. Nagant fired. The beam of energy tore through the night, screaming like a banshee. Izuku moved. Transmission, second gear. He vanished. He reappeared in the path of the beam, midair. He pulled his right arm back. The arm that wasn't numb. The arm wrapped in black whip. F.A. Gene. Max output. He punched the beam. It was madness. It was suicide. He punched pure energy. The collision turned the night into day. A shockwave of white light expanded outward, shattering the glass of the control tower, knocking the drones out of the sky, and flattening the scavengers on the walls. In the center of the explosion, a single roar echoed. Smayawash. The beam shattered. Refracted. It sprayed wildly into the sky, carving scars into the clouds. Izuku fell from the sky, landing hard on the concrete. Smoke rose from his arm. His glove was incinerated. His skin was burned, but he stood. Nagant was thrown back against the tower, her rifle arm smoking, jammed. Izuku panted, looking up at the screen where AFO was still watching, his smile gone. Is that all you've got? Izuku growled. AFO leaned into the camera. No, the demon lord whispered. That was just the opening ceremony. The ground began to rumble. The walls of Tartarus began to shift. From the ocean behind them, something massive was rising. Welcome to the party, Izuku.